Welcome to our second annual Mega Wellness Summit, where we are transforming lives one aha moment at a time. I'm your host, Nikki Jensen, and thank you so much for tuning in and sharing this event with your friends and family. I know you will thoroughly love today's guest. She is known for her dowsing talents and the famous infinity wave. Welcome, Hope Fitzgerald. How are you, Hope?
Hi, Nikki. I am very well, thank you. Very, very well on this wintry day.
Oh, is it wintry by you?
It is.
I'm in San Diego. It's still chilly here. I have to say I'm cold, but what's the temperature by you?
Actually, we had a warm day today. It's about 35.
Oh, that's not too bad.
Oh.
I used to live in Wisconsin. It was very cold. It was like negative 10, negative 20. Yeah. I used to say, why do I live in a place where the air hurts my face?
Exactly.
But yeah, I had to go. I'm not native to that kind of cold weather, so it didn't work well with me. But I'm thrilled that you are on Mega Wellness Summit. I am so grateful for you, and I know that our listeners are really going to enjoy what you have to offer them because you have some tools that you give people to really help shift their lives. So one, I want to talk about dowsing. So for our audience, some of us are very new to all of this. And I want you to explain, because you're so elegant in the way that you explain things, but what is dowsing?
Okay. Well, dowsing, some people have heard of it when they've heard about somebody trying to find the best place to drill a water well on property. And it conjures up that old-timey guy walking through a field with a Y-shaped stick in his hand. He's holding the open ends, the two ends of the Y, and the center part of the stick is sort of sticking out in front of him. And when the person has that dowser person has found where the water is flowing, the stick points down quite decidedly towards the ground, and that is where then he would say, this is where you would want to drill your well. Well, so that's the kind of old-timey version that people might have seen in movies or heard about, and that is an ancient art, and was indeed, and still today, some dowsers use sticks to find water, but it's really evolved way beyond that. There are so many dowsing tools, and there are so many things you can dowse for. So even if you asked that old-timey dowser, well, why is the stick pointing down where there's water? And the dowser might even scratch his head and say, gee, I don't really know. All I know is that it works. And so I could tell you a couple of things. We strongly feel that it is a science when used in this way, that you're actually tapping into electromagnetic pulses or frequencies. The veins that run in the earth, and especially water, is detectable as a frequency. Why the stick responds for some people and not others is an interesting question, because not everybody can walk around like that and find water, supposedly. Mm-hmm. So now let's put that aside just for the moment, and let everybody know that you can dowse on your land for using something other than a stick. You can use metal rods. They're called L rods, and they're shaped like an L. That's why they're called that way. You can hold either one or one in each hand, so you have a pair, and you can walk land, and you can indeed find water. And in my opinion, anybody can do this. Okay, I teach people how to dowse because it is really, I think, something that every single human being can do. It might take people a little longer than others. Certain people might be predisposed. So, the way that I teach people is to walk in a field, to look for certain things, to even stand in a field and say, ask the rod to show them, where certain landmarks are that you can see, and you will see the rod turning to that landmark. Okay, so in that sense, we say, well, what's making the dowsing rod move around? And then we get back to the same question. We scratch our heads and we say, well, perhaps this is you tapping into your higher self. Maybe this is you tapping into the world around us that is actually very much alive, the soil beneath us, even the rocks, the trees, the plants, there is a consciousness. Let's just say there's a consciousness there. It may not be as the same as ours, but there is something there. And so this is a fun way to practice getting used to having answers come that are clear, that are obvious. So, for instance, if I stand in my front yard and I hold one rod and I say, please show me where the road is, and the rod will swing and point directly at the road, no matter where I'm turned. You can see this in my dowsing video on my website. I do exactly that. And then I can say, please show me where north is, and the rod will swing to the north. So it's really kind of like a compass. It can really tell you anything in that ilk very easily, and you can verify that indeed is north, and that indeed is where the road is. So
right.
your mind that wants to question and doubt and do all this stuff really can't, because you're seeing it with in plain sight.
Is it using your energy to answer these questions?
Well, when we talk about our energy, that's actually a big question. What is our energy? And we do have our own system, our system, body, mind, and spirit, that has its energy, but we're also tapped into other energies all the time. So, and each person might be tapped into a different level or kind or grade of energy. So it's more than just our energy. But I think where you were going with your question is this just coming from us? Is this maybe coming from my mind, or the electricity in my mind? Is this somehow coming through my copper rod? And by the way, the rod where you hold it is a sleeve, so that the L-shaped piece can move freely within it. So your hand is not, influencing where the rod is turning. It's moving freely within this, like a straw almost, holding it inside. So I think, that it is a part of us. I think it's a higher part of us, a wisdom that we are actually in all the time and don't even know it. It's partly our intuition, but it's something even bigger than that. And I think it's also from the earth itself. So when I tend to think of myself as a bigger straw. I've got the sleeve that I'm holding onto with the rod, but then I kind of figure that I am sort of a hollow container when I'm dowsing, and that information can come both from below and from above to inform me, because I don't always know. I mean, the kinds of questions I ask are things that I don't know. In my mind, I don't know. So I have to get my I don't know mind out of the way, or actually I stay in an I don't know mind. I get my knowing mind out of the way, and I become like a hollow tube to be informed by the information that the rods are giving me. So if I was standing in my front yard and I said, gee, does I could even ask like a weather question, or I could say, if I was, let's see, I'm trying to think of a question that I couldn't know from standing there and looking with my own eyes. I could say, show me in what direction is the school, and it would swing around and show me where the school is, even though I can't see it. So let's say I didn't know where the school was, it would show me the direction of the school. So that's one level that dowsing can be used on. I mean, and people use it for finding oil, gas, all kinds of things. In Texas, the teacher I initially learned dowsing from was a feng shui master, and she was hired by big oil companies to find veins of oil in Texas. So this can be really used on a professional level for very specific purposes such as that. And you can also use dowsing like this when you're tracking certain energy lines in the earth. If any of your listeners ever go to places like sort of the famous places like pyramids, or both in Egypt or in South America or in England, they have a lot of standing stones in circles, and you can actually measure the energy in these stone structures with the rods. It's quite interesting. You can also determine where on your property. Some people like to put up a kind of outdoor place of worship, let's say, like maybe they want to set up some stones, or maybe they want to do a labyrinth, or maybe they just want to have a little altar. You can use the rods to point you where on your property that might like to be. And I did that. I have a labyrinth in the back of our house, and I had a hunch that's where it was going to go, but sure enough, the rods told us exactly where it would be and exactly the design of it. So when we tend to think of ourselves as separated from nature and from a lot of these energies that we were referring to earlier that are all around us all the time. And when we douse, we sort of start to reveal that those energies are indeed interacting with us, and we're getting in communication with them. And it's very exciting. It's really, really cool. So there are lots of dowsers in the world who just use it on the land and for tracking things like that. And you can also use it for determining the most auspicious date for something. For instance, a wedding or a ceremony, some other kind of ceremony, or the dates of travel. I always douse my dates of travel, whether I'm going by myself or taking a group with me. And I just wouldn't think of doing it without that. And this brings into question free will. Okay, so let's say I don't feel like going on that day. Well,
right.
You don't have to do it. It's just you're asking for the most auspicious day, or for the day that seems to be most in flow for you. And yet, if that doesn't line up, you don't have to. We don't have to sweat buckets. We can just go. It's not going to line up for me. I'm just going to ask that everything flows smoothly anyway. But I can't do it on that specific day, and so be it. But here's the really cool thing, and this is when I teach dowsing. This is really why I do that. Dowsing is a way to strengthen the muscle of communication between us and these forces, these energies, this wisdom that is available. Now, I don't want to put names on it because everybody might have a different name, and some people might not even believe it's there. I don't even know. There might be atheistic dowsers out there. That's quite possible. I doubt it, but they might be out there. but you don't have to believe in lots and lots of things to be a dowser. What's most important for me is this communication, and it's a relationship building tool. So lots and lots of times in our lives, we reach these crossroads. We reach these places where I don't know whether to go right or left, straight ahead, stay put. I really don't know what to do. At those times, some people, call an astrologer. Some people call a psychic. Lots of people pull out tarot cards, and some people just sit there in a quandary and can't figure out how to get guidance. If there has been a relationship that has been being built with some kind of dowsing tool, and by the way, pendulums are also dowsing tools, useful in other ways. If somebody has been using something, whether it's dowsing or cards or I Ching or whatever it is, then there is a track. There is a relationship that's already begun. So that when you get to a crunchy time where I really don't know what to do, you can turn to that tool to learn more about it and to receive guidance about what to do. It opens us up to a world that is not confined by this gray matter on top of our shoulders. And that brain of ours is really fantastic, and it's not the only way to view whatever the situation is. So this is why I teach people how to dowse. People come to me all the time for questions in their own crossroads. And what happens for me when I open myself up to be that straw, that channel, is all kinds of information that neither the person asking nor I could ever have imagined comes in. It's just scenarios that are a much larger perspective, a wider perspective, seeing how the whole this might be a singular question, but it's actually a much larger issue, and helping people to gain that wide view, so that they know why they're being told to now step forward, to the right, to the left, or stay put. Because once they understand the context for all this and the ramifications, then it's easier for them to say, oh, okay, I see now why I should do what this is. Or maybe they don't do it, but at least they have a view of it. So that's why I teach this and encourage people to pick up a pair of dowsing rods or a pendulum, and start the conversation so that when the time comes, you do have a mechanism, you do have a relationship that you can trust and rely on to guide you.
Yeah, I use my pendulum all the time. I think it's very important in business and making decisions, and it's like a little friend who can tell the future what you should do in your crossroads. I agree with you on that for sure. And I don't know how to use dowsing rods, but it sounds extremely interesting. And I think that if our audience wants to contact you, because I'm sure somebody listening is at crossroads in their life and can contact you if they've never even heard of what a pendulum is or what a pendulum does. And so it's great that you can teach them how to do it themselves, for one, and you can answer questions for them as well. So I think that's phenomenal.
Yeah, so I don't usually teach in my sessions. I have separate classes for that. But in any event, if you look on my website to the dowsing page and you see the video, you'll get a sense of how it works. What's really important is, this is where the finesse comes in, is how you ask the questions. And it takes people a little time to realize that most of us, when we start asking questions, are asking from a base of assumptions. So learning how to basically step away from those assumptions and really be in I don't know mind. That takes a little doing for most people. And then there are, the reason I like dowsing rods a tiny bit more than a pendulum, although pendulum's great, especially for body issues, dowsing for physical stuff and some emotional stuff, very, very good for that. But when it comes to the kinds of questions that I am usually dealing in, big life questions, the dowsing rods for me are first of all, they're a little faster, but secondly, the nuances that I get with the rods are quite pronounced. So I'll get, so how the rods look, I hold them straight out in front of me, so my hands are in front of my body, my arms are kind of at 90 degrees where my elbow is, and so the two long pieces of the L are sticking straight out ahead. And when I ask a question that is that gets a yes answer, the rods cross inwards toward my belly button, towards me. And when I ask and get a no answer, they cross out and away from each other. Now, that can be different for different people. Some people have it opposite that, and that's fine. You program your rods for what you wish, or sometimes they know what they want to do before you ever program them. So, but in that range, that really 180 range, are lots of different stopping places, speeds. The right rod does one thing, the left rod does another, and so I've learned to read these nuances and have follow-up questions that really track it down, like following a breadcrumb trail, till we get to the heart of the issue. And it's really kind of fun for me, although some of the questions are not fun questions. I mean, they're tough questions, big life issue questions. But it's for me the act of discovery to be in not knowing and just following the lead that is put in front of me. And of course, then other things happen that guide me in my question asking, and so that's why I like to use the L rods for those nuances. But not that you don't have them with a pendulum. I'm just saying for me, these are the tool. And it doesn't really matter. Everybody will find their tool of choice. But if you're already dowsing with a pendulum, then you should be able to pick up rods and use them no problem.
Very interesting. Well, thank you for explaining that. That was a great explanation, and I know that this is very new for people, especially when they come over to my house. They're like, what is this? And if I'm testing them for like a food allergy, then I'll get the pendulum out, and they just think I'm crazy. So it's great to see other people, professionals, talk about the pendulum and different ways that they can get their answers, and go to somebody who can help them really explain what's going on with them further, especially when it comes to their health.
Yes. Well, I'll tell you something kind of funny. So I learned this dowsing when I was taking a feng shui class, and I very timidly, began to ask questions. And I usually tell people, when you're learning how to douse, you don't want to ask big, high-stakes questions like, should I move to Alaska? No, you're going to start. You're going to start with, is it in my highest physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual good to go to the grocery store today? And if they say no, then you have a choice to either answer, follow up with action what you're being guided to do, or not. If you decide to say, okay, is there another day that would be better? Okay, how about Wednesday? How about Thursday? How about Friday? And you'll get your day. They'll tell you the day to go to the grocery store, and you do it. Now you are signaling to these energies, these forces, that you're listening. You're paying attention. Okay? So I started with silly things like that. Just because, this was almost 20 years. No, this is 20 years ago. I was whatever, had two babies at home, and whatever. I was in Texas. I didn't know anybody who did anything like I did down there, and at that time, and so I was basically standing in my closet doing this with wire coat hangers. Okay, so
oh wow.
So anyway, over time, again, I built up the relationship so that when I asked bigger questions, I now had built up also a trust level. And I would ask the same question over and over just to make sure it wasn't just me, am I really hearing this correctly? And I would get, confirmation. And so time went by, and then I really started dowsing about much, much deeper and bigger stuff. And then friends started to ask me if I would douse for them. And I kind of did it like a party trick, because I didn't want responsibility for other people making big decisions in their lives, based on what I'm doing. Of course, I'm making big decisions for me and for my family, but, I don't want to presume that somebody else should do that just because these little wire coat hangers are crossing in front of them, And that went on for a while, and then it got. Then I went up to kind of another level, and then people started to pay me for this, and I really learned. I cared very much about being in integrity with this, so I learned. I devised a way to test my dowsing level so that I was, that I could trust that I was giving information at a very high level, as pure as possible. And so I run that test on myself, usually before I work with the client to make sure that I'm operating at the highest octane, and because I don't want to charge people money and not be there in 100%. So then all this time went by, and we did all these massive things based on dowsing, and then I found out, what do you know, there's a dowsing convention in the United States. In fact, there are several, but there's one American Dowsing Society convention every year, and it has been held in Vermont. It's been going on for like 50, 60 years, and I had no idea. I developed the whole thing myself. All the ways of asking all these things, I just developed myself, and came to find out there are hundreds of people that meet every year up in Vermont to do dowsing and to have classes and to share what their innovations are. And not only that, but people come from Europe and all over the world, and there are dowsing societies in other places in the world, especially in the UK. So I went for the first one a couple of years ago, and I thought I'd stepped into Hogwarts. In the sense that there was a room, a big gymnasium filled with all these dowsing gadgets. I had no idea that there were so many things that you could buy as dowsing tools, and it's like a kid in a candy store, I'm telling you. And I met these wonderful people, men and women. It was wonderful to have a balance of men and women. And, it's really, as I said in the beginning, there is a science to this, and there are some people that really just view it mostly that way. And so I found my fellow dowsers, way after all this had happened, and I was so grateful. They're great people, and so you can look that up to American Dowsing Society. So it's .org, I think it is. So, but that was kind of funny to discover. Wow, there are people like me out there.
Yeah, well, it's funny. I grew up like that because my mom's very much into all of that metaphysical world. And so not only did I grow up more organic and holistically, but also with the belief of, that aliens are real, and, knew about energy as a child and talking or I knew about the pendulum. It's probably at the age of 10. I'm in my room. Does he like me? Yes, no. So I would steal my mom's pendulum and pretend, that I knew what I was doing, because I watched her do it, and it was fun. So I'm glad that other people get to see this other side of healing and wellness, because it does go hand in hand. And so it's
very much so, yeah.
Yeah, it's great. And you have another tool. I love your story about the infinity wave and how it came about. And if you can tell our listeners about the infinity wave, that would be great, and how it emerged in your life.
Well, I will, and I would ask everybody to have the most open mind possible, because this is, it's just a little unusual, but it's proven out to be something quite remarkable, not just for me, of course, but for many, many people. Well, like you, my mom was very into metaphysics, and this was back in the 50s, so, it was very hush-hush, and so I grew up with an openness to all of this, except I just didn't know about dowsing until I was a little older. But I really had a very spiritual connection at a very young age, and eventually I ended up having a big spiritual awakening when I went to the Findhorn community in Scotland when I was 21. And so I basically, though, kept everything quite private, because that was still the safest way to do anything. There were a few people who I could meet with and talk to about these things, but very few. And so, but I kept studying and learning different healing techniques and this and that, and reading and so on. And so I became a neurofeedback practitioner, which is a brain training technique, which also, I think, enabled a consciousness enhancement. It's really a great tool for the brain, but in quieting the brain, much like in meditation, that leaves a lot of space available for other things. So it's not uncommon for people who have had a bunch of neurofeedback sessions to come and say, gee, I've started to notice that I know when the phone's going to ring. And these are the kinds of things that can happen when the brain learns how to be quiet, and when the brain learns how to release stuff that it just doesn't need. And it is the arbiter of that. That's the great thing about neurofeedback. But I'll leave that aside for now. So anyway, in 2010, I had a very challenging year with family issues, and that year, if I wrote the script, you would say, "Gee, I don't even think a soap opera would take that. It's too weird and wacky." So at the end of it, I was really spent on every level, and I decided that for rejuvenation, I needed to go away and really allow my tanks to be filled. So I went out to the Pacific Northwest to back-to-back sound healing weekends, and through the course of that, came to basically it was a shamanic journey and initiation and activation. I wouldn't have called it that then. Looking back now, I see it that's what it was. My experience was just that I was wiping my inner bowl clean. I just scraping out every aspect that no longer served me, and not inviting anything in, just for the feeling of being empty, just for a moment. You could have called me any name at that point, because I didn't even have an identity, when I was done with this. But the other thing that it gifted me with, and this is part of wiping one's inner bowl clean, is the understanding, the really depthful understanding of what that whole drama, that whole trauma had been about for me, what I was being asked to open my eyes to, and in learning that lesson, I was in such gratitude for it, because I knew then and there that I would not be repeating that one ever again, not in this lifetime or any other. And so, when you've reached that understanding about something, you just feel so humbled and grateful to have been shown it. And so at that moment, I said, and again, I didn't at that time label the whatever you want to call it, source, for lack of a better word. I said, do with me what you will. I am a willing vessel. I basically, I'm yours, I'm great, So that was the very last practice of the very last day. And I came home and had this delightful 3 days of pure emptiness. I was so happy. Oh, it was just amazing. I was so light. And because I think nature abhors a vacuum, all of a sudden, boom, I have this vision. I have a vision of this giant wall of water coming to the earth and washing over it. Now, it was not a threatening wall of water. And it was, I don't even know, as high as the Empire State Building. It was huge. And it was quite beautiful, and I understood it at that time to be a metaphor because it came with a byline. And the byline was, there is a wave of energy coming to the planet. If you choose to swim with it, your evolution will go more swiftly and more smoothly. If you choose to resist it, it will not. So all of a sudden I get this vision and this byline, and I don't know what the heck this is about. So then I caught my breath, and soon thereafter, within the same afternoon, a second vision. This time the water was turned to the side. I was looking at the cross-section of the wave. So you know how we look at a wave, a curling wave that a surfer is in the tube, that kind of thing.
Right.
So it kind of formed the letter C. And this time the byline was about when the way that the wave gets the energy to crest is by pulling away from the shore and deepening into the seabed. That's where the energy is received in order to lift up and crest. So the byline was, leave all that you know on the shore. Go to the earth and go to the wisdom keepers of the earth for your information, the ancient wisdom, and then mix that with this incoming wave of energy. And then what happened was that curling sea, that cresting sea, instead of just falling and tumbling into the water, it arced around and it became a standing figure eight made of flowing water. And it was just floating out in front of my eyes, really about a foot out, hanging there. And now this is not my eyeball eyes. This is my mind's eye. Thank you. It was as if I was walking around with this thing right in front. If you put your hand up in front of your eyes about a foot away and you try to walk around with something like that, that's how present it was for 3 days afterwards. And there was no byline with this figure eight made of flowing water. So what do? I go to my trusty rods. And I said, okay, I don't know what's happening. Can you please explain? Now, that's not a yes or no question, right? Which is what we usually ask our dowsing tools. But I go through a process of elimination, and I start to hear things. And so eventually I came to understand that this figure eight made of flowing water had a name, and the name is the infinity wave. And when I asked about it and what it was, I was told that it is a tool, an energetic tool to help us in this transition that we are going to be going through. This giant wall of water is representing a push of energy that is going to basically kind of speed things up, push us all to our next evolutionary state, whatever that is. And sometimes that kind of push can be uncomfortable, sometimes, especially if we resist it. And if we use this energetic tool of the infinity wave, and I'll talk about how that could happen in a minute, but if we use that tool, we will actually get through these transitions more elegantly and more easily and with less stress and strife and struggle.
Mm-hmm.
I was then told right away to create workshops about this, and starting in the new year, in January of 2011 that was. I received these in November of 2010, and I was told to do one weekend workshop a month for 9 months, and they were to be in sets of 3, so January, February, March was one set of Infinity Wave workshops, and then repeat and repeat. And I said, I really don't want to run a workshop like this. I said, I really don't. I've been a teacher and a producer and a director and a performer. I mean, like, I have been up in front of people. I have no problem with that. It was in this particular realm of teaching something, first of all, completely unknown, secondly, in the spiritual world, that I did not feel up to. And I basically got the answer, you said you were a willing vessel. So I did say that, didn't I? I did say that. Okay, so I had to really push through a tremendous amount of fear, and one might even say unreasonable fear. But things I found out later made it seem not so unreasonable. But at the time, I couldn't even understand why I was so terrified of stepping out in this way. It's hard to remember that I ever really felt that way, but I sure did. And I said, but what the heck am I going to teach? Just show everybody this figure 8 made of flowing water and have a good time? I mean, and they said, we will tell you. And then I had to book the room and pay for it, not knowing anything. I had to send invitations to people and trust that they would show up and charge them money, and I didn't even know what I was going to teach. Now, that's scary. That's scary. Mm-hmm. And then what happened was every week leading up to the first workshop, I started to channel these beautiful practices. I didn't know at the time that's what they were. They told me that, but my head was trying to catch up with all this. And the practices came in one per week, so by the weekend I had 3 of these practices, and then I pulled together. Now, I guess the topic of evolution was a topic I needed to invest in, and I went back to my Findhorn teachings on evolution, and I sort of strung this together in a framework where these practices could help us to understand where we were in the trajectory of this push of energy, this big wave, and then to try out this energetic with whatever was going on in our lives, so we could start practicing. So sure enough, it had remarkable results, and nobody was more shocked than I. And it took me really until the very last workshop to go, yeah, I guess this is a thing.
Right.
I guess this is a thing. Like, I've been standing back with my arms closed like a scientist, trying to measure, is this really for real? But when there are so many stories now of how this has worked in people's lives that it's just, I still kind of go, how magical, how miraculous that we were given this. So,
yeah, and I actually use it because when I was given the infinity wave through Patrick Durkin, and I listened to a lot of your videos and a lot of you're given the infinity wave like a toolkit, basically. And so I listened to all of that and did a lot of reading and applied it to my life. And so every morning now I wake up and I do the infinity wave and just connect myself and ground myself. And so it will be cool for everybody to hear how it works in your words.
Sure. Well, I'm really glad that you're using it, and I hope that you experience the a sense of flow and peace that it brings. So how it works? Well, this can get pretty out there, so I'm just, again, let's all have as open minds as we can. In the quantum world, we understand that we are all connected, that everything affects everything. So, what we are internally experiencing affects those in the room with us, affects our animals, affects our plants even, affects even a larger sphere than that. We are part of a field, okay? And that field is moving all the time. Even things that look dense, like rocks and furniture and things like that, are actually moving. We know that if you zoom in closely enough, that the atoms within those dense things are moving. So, and the universe is moving. Our planet is moving. Our galaxy is moving. Everything is moving all the time. Okay. So when we decide to direct that movement and actually embed in that movement a certain quality, something interesting happens. So if you imagine that this figure 8 made of flowing water, now inherent in that water is love and compassion at the highest level. So for those of you who are not new to terminology that involves dimensions, the word dimension, we know that we live in 3D. This is the third dimension. Well, there are other dimensions, and some people say there are thousands, and some people say there are 12, and some, it doesn't really matter to me how many there are. What I can say is that this infinity wave is from the 10th dimension, and most people agree that that's a pretty pure place. That's a highly refined place. So when we are talking about love and compassion from that purified place, we're talking about something that really as humans we almost can't conceive, because our version of love is mostly in 3D, maybe 4D. And it's a good thing. There's nothing wrong with it. But this is something entirely other. So, okay, so now let's just think, Nikki. You're over there in San Diego. I'm here in Massachusetts. And we're on the phone. And let's imagine that we connect ourselves up with this infinity wave. So what we're going to do is I'm going to imagine the 8, and one loop is going to be ending in my heart center, and the other loop is going to be embedded in your heart center. So somewhere in the middle, in Kansas or somewhere, this wave will cross itself. It doesn't touch in the middle. It just, the flow has to continue, right? So I am now connecting with you intentionally with this geometry that is moving, knowing that embedded in that is this love and compassion. I don't have to try to put love and compassion in, it's right there. Now, as I am bathing you in love and compassion from me, you are bathing me in love and compassion from you. We are both in a quantum connection through this moving energetic. Now, for me, that makes me feel really good. I hook into you in a different way. I relax in a different way into your field. You're connected with my field, and we're both held in this high vibrational state. So the conversation, the quality of the conversation, is pretty much guaranteed to be at a very high level. I'm not going to say what, I'm not going to label that, but I just know it's going to be at a high level. In fact, we can both send infinity waves out to your entire listening audience. We can just bathe all of them. We can just say, please send infinity waves to everybody who gets to hear this interview right now, no matter when you're hearing it, right? Yeah. So all of a sudden there's a big wave of waves. Okay. Now, let's go back to the fact that it is flowing water. That's not just a metaphor, okay? Because, of course, built into the metaphor of water is, well, water can seek the path of least resistance. Water is cleansing. Water is moving. Water is, in its purest state, really enlivening for us. Water can remove resistances. Water can, carve out the big rocks along the riverbank. And water can be in so many different forms. It can be very gentle and slow. It can be raging in the spring, It can be crashing on rocks in the ocean. It can be glassy on a sea with no wind. It can interact with other elements beautifully, except fire, where it does tend to put them out. But water has all these metaphors that actually work when you think about, okay, I'm in a crunch time and I need to get through this. Well, am I going to get through this hammering my head against a rock, or am I going to get through this if I am more fluid, if I allow my being to relax and move down the river instead of trying to be a dam, So the metaphor of water really works for the things that we are encountering in our lives, the resistances, the difficulties, the challenges, the stuck stuff. On another level, the water is really quite literal in the sense that you are, so as we know from our work with Patrick, you are somewhere between 80% and 90% water yourself, just as I am, just as the planet is. This ratio is not a coincidence. And so your water, as we know from Dr. Emoto and other scientists around the world, water is impressionable. Water has memory. Water can be purified through prayer. And this has been proven over and over. We know that if we label a bottle of water with love, that it changes its crystalline structure. So the molecular structure, So the water in you is in a particular state. And when we put the infinity wave into your being, it affects you physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. You put love and compassion, like the word love on a bottle. You put this energetic, this geometry made of flowing water with love and compassion in it, in your body. You do the same thing. It does the same thing as labeling the bottle of water with love. It allows your water to move into a different molecular structure. Now, I have to say, I haven't tested this. I don't know how to test this. I just trust it because I see it happening and I feel it happening to myself. And because of the way that people's lives are changed as a result of using this energetic, it has to be that. I don't know what else it could be. So, so that is where, when you and I are waving together, the water in me is connecting to the water in you through this water energetic of love and compassion at the highest frequency. So now both of us are being held in this frequency and informing our bodies, of where we want to be on a molecular level. Mm-hmm. So I hope that explains it a little bit.
It absolutely does. And I wanted to just go back and touch on a bit of, if you can simplify quantum physics. You mentioned that a little bit, and so I think our listeners are going, not really sure what that is.
Oh, well, that's a very big topic. But
if you could simplify that at all.
Just, I think the simplest way is to explain, well, first of all, a wonderful film that people can watch is called What the Bleep Do We Know? And that examines quantum physics beautifully. It's a part story, part documentary. It really is great. You'll probably want to watch it more than once. But
it is a great one.
It is great, and it shows you how it works, that we are all connected. They have done experiments where they look, the famous experiments where they look at light, at photons, and they send them through different filters. I don't know if this is simplifying, but basically the upshot of it is that the photons would go through and they'd have fairly predictable patterns that they left after going through the filters. However, once the scientist was watching the experiment, watching the photons go through the filters, their behavior changed. The summation is that the viewer had an effect on the photon. The photon was cognizant in some way. I'm not saying, that carries a big brain around on itself, but there was a consciousness that understood that it was being watched and it behaved differently. This particular experiment has been repeated multiple times by different people. So what we come away with is it really matters where we are, what we're thinking, what we're doing, because we are affecting everything around us. So when we go back to the ancient teachings that said we are all one, the spiritual leaders over the millennia have known this to be true. Now it's basically being proven scientifically to be true. So does that help?
It does, yeah.
Okay.
And I do suggest, I know it's such a very broad topic and it's big in itself, and so you're right, by watching the documentary will definitely help people wrap their brains around it, especially if this is new for people, because it's quite in depth and to understand. So thank you. I appreciate that very much. And, I know that you have something for our listeners, and you have an amazing offer, and I want you to go ahead and share that with people because I'm quite excited about it.
Sure, great. Well, I'm sharing with everybody this article that I wrote some years ago about the infinity wave and how it came in, and you've already heard some of that, but the article goes into a little more depth. But also in the article, I point out some of the ways to use the infinity wave, what I call the daily wave. In your everyday life, how you can start to play with this. You don't even have to believe that it's a thing. Believe me, it doesn't really matter if you just start playing with it and see what happens. So there are a couple of situations and of just daily uses that I lay out in the article for you to try on. And also at the very end, there's a brief excerpt of my first channeling about the wave, and about those who are using it. So that's for you to chew on. And
awesome, thank you. I've read the article; it's very good.
Okay, and secondly, I really would love to offer to one lucky person a free half-hour dowsing session. So the way that you get to sign up for that is to you'll have a link, I think, and all you have to do, you have to put your email, your name and your email into this drawing. It's a drawing, see? So you put your name and email in there, and what I do then, once a certain amount of time has passed, I let a generous amount of time pass so that everybody gets a chance to hear the interview. I will douse the list of names who have signed up, and I douse it from top to bottom and from bottom to top just to make sure. And I ask who on this list is most in need of a dowsing session with me, and that's my criteria. And I go up and down, and then every time it's usually the one name, same one when I go up and when I go down. So that's how I do that, and then I contact that person, and then we get to have a session. And it can be a Skype call because it can be anywhere in the world. I've done these sessions all over the place. And if you like Skype, you can see the rods moving, which is, if it's your first time, it's kind of fun to see that and start to understand how they work. So somebody's going to get lucky.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I think that is amazing. And to really see this come to light in real life, I really think that people will get excited to see how that works, because to hear it is one thing, but to see it is another. So it's very cool. And I appreciate you being on Mega Wellness Summit and joining us and sharing your wisdom. And I know that everyone's going to really appreciate all the things you have to offer, and especially your knowledge about dowsing and the infinity wave, and just applying that to your life. It could be a really huge healing. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
You are so welcome. I thank you for having me on. It's always great to have a conversation, with a willing soul. So thank you very much, Nikki. And I say thank you to all your listeners, and just say wave on, everybody.
Wave on. Thank you.